Hello and welcome to Temple in Your Living Room. We're the only temple in town or in the country where you have a recliner. If you don't have a recliner, go get one. What do you mean you're not that old? Come on, come on. Let's start with bim bum. Bim bum, bim 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 bum, oh bim 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 bum, sherry every bim bum, bim 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 bum, oh bim 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 bum. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom. Bim bam, bim 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 bam, oh bim 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 bam. All right. Turn in your prayer book to page 120. Get your Shabbat candles ready if you haven't done so already. And let's recite the blessing on the Shabbat candles. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu bar mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to kindle the light of Shabbat. So, this last week, Tuesday was it? Wednesday. This last week, Wednesday night was Simchat Torah. What is Simchat Torah? Simchat Torah is a celebration of Torah. Traditionally, we start reading the new parshas on Simchat Torah. We start with Parsha Bereishit. All right? And we normally in shul we do a thing where we will call people up, we will read the last line of Torah, and then if we're fortunate enough to have somebody that can actually, we roll the Torah back to the beginning, and then we read the first line. And we go from there. It's usually you carry the Torahs around the shul 7 times in a procession. The kids walk around and wave Israeli flags. It's a very joyous occasion where we celebrate Torah. So, Bereishit, the very first parsha, is also the very first Shabbat. It talks about the very first Shabbat. The goal of Shabbat is always to recharge. Well, why do we need to recharge? It's not just about resting. There's a reason that we have to recharge, which when you read Bereishit, you see that God recharges. What do you recharge for? To create. I can't stand here right now and tell you why I keep doing this every week. Something inside me tells me that I have to. But I can't tell you why or what that is. But it's that spark inside of us that on good days lets us know there is something bigger that we're connected to. So, we recharge to create. Turn to page 123. Get your wine, and remember what I've taught you here in Temple in Your Living Room. If it doesn't have a screw-on cap, it's not kosher wine. I don't care what they tell you. So, this is what we're going to be reading about when we get to Bereishit. The heaven and the earth were finished in all their array. On the seventh day God finished the work that God had been doing, and God ceased on the seventh day from all the work that God had done. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because on it God ceased from all the work of creation that God had done. Raise your cup. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam borei bria gafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'rotzavanu v'shabbat kodesh v'maratzon hikilanu zikaron l'ma'aseh Bereishit ki hu yom tehilot amikraim kodesh Zeh letziat Mitzrayim kivanu v'ata ve'otanu kidashta mikol hamim v'shabbat kodesh ve'amum ratzon hihaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh on Shabbat. Amen. L'chaim. Praise to you, Adonai, who sanctifies Shabbat. To page 127. And let's read together the one at the top of the page. There are days when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure with what we do not gain. On Shabbat we seek not to acquire but to share. There are days when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that can never be exhausted. On Shabbat, we stand in wonder before the mystery of creation. There are days when we act as if we cared nothing for the rights of others. On Shabbat, we remember that justice is our duty and a better world our goal. So we embrace Shabbat, day of rest, day of wonder, day of peace. So what is the divine spark with it? Each one of us. It's that need to find purpose. That's what Frankl said. That need to find purpose. And where does the strength and the courage come from to do things when there's no reward and no appreciation and you're tired and you've run out of ideas? That's when the divine spark becomes important and becomes readily visible in our heads, because we don't have it within our human form to take one more step towards that goal, that purpose. And yet something kicks in and we continue. It's what got people through the concentration camps. The people that got through them were the ones who found purpose. Even there, they found purpose. Turn to page 128, and let's sing Hine Matov. And as we sing Hine Matov, let's be happy for the brothers and sisters we're sharing our space with at this time, and look forward to a time when we can get together in groups safely again. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet akim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet akim gam yachad. Hine ma tov shevet akim gam yachad. Hine ma tov shevet akim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim shevet akim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'magayim shevet akim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'magayim shevet akim gam yachad. Hine ma tov,
Hine ma tov,
la 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 la. Hine ma tov,
Hine ma tov,
la 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 la. Hey! How good and how pleasant it is when brothers and sisters dwell together. The sun on the treetops no longer is seen. Come gather to welcome the Sabbath, our queen. Behold her descending, the holy, the blessed, and with her the angels of peace and of rest. Draw near, and here abide. Draw near, O Sabbath bride. Peace also to you, you angels of peace. Turn to page 138. And today, because we are celebrating Bereishit, where we have the first Shabbat, I'm going to actually read you the English. If you have a book, you can read along. Beloved, come to meet the bride. Beloved, come to greet Shabbat. Keep and remember a single command. The only God caused us to hear, the eternal one. God's name is one. Glory and praise are God's. Come with me to meet Shabbat, forever a fountain of blessing. Still it flows as from the start, the last days for which the first was made. Royal shrine, city of kings, rise up and leave your ravaged state. You have dwelt long enough in the valley of tears. Now God will shower mercy on you. Lift yourself up, shake off the dust, array yourself in beauty. O my people, at hand is Bethlehem's David, Jesse's son, bringing deliverance into my life. Awake, awake, your light has come. Arise, shine, awake, and sing. The Eternal's glory dawns upon you. An end to shame and degradation. Forget your sorrow, quiet your groans. The afflicted of my people find respite in you. The city renewed upon its ancient ruins. The scavengers are scattered. Your devourers have fled. As a bridegroom rejoices in his bride, your God takes joy in you. Your space will be broad, your worship free. Await the promised one. We will exalt, we will sing up for joy. Enter in peace, O crown of your husband. Enter in gladness, enter in joy. Come to the people that keeps its faith. Enter, O bride, enter, O bride. So Shabbat is a time to be welcomed with gladness. It's a time to be celebrated. But above all of that, it's a time to recharge, a time to quit working for a minute and just be. To give us the strength to go through the hardships and the joys of life. Turn to page 142 for Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malakei Hasharet, Malakei Elyon. Mi Melech Malakei Hamakim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bakim Shalom, Malakei Hashalom, Malakei Elyon. Mi Melech Malakei Hamakim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bachuni l'shalom, Malakei Hashalom, Malakei Elyon. Mi Melech Malakei Hamakim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Sekim l'shalom, Malakei Hashalom, Malakei Elyon. Mi Melech Malakei Hamakim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Enter in peace, O messengers of peace. Depart in peace, O messengers of peace. Angels of the Most High, Majesty of majesties, Holy One of blessing. Turn to page 144 for the Reader's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbamin B'yamad yivrachute v'mikmokute B'kayek onu v'yomekon Ukayed kobed Yisrael Bahagala, Bahagala Uzmin man kahariv Limuru Amen Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Leolam El Maya Yitbarak V'yishtabak V'par V'rama V'naseh V'yidada V'yitale V'yitalal Shmei Kudesha Brichu Leo Meko Brata V'shirata Tush Bekata V'nekemata Damiram B'yama V'imuru. Amen. Teach me, O God, a blessing, a prayer, on the mystery of a withered leaf, on ripened fruit so fair, of the freedom to see, to sense, to breathe, to know, to hope, to despair. Teach my lips a blessing, a hymn of praise, as each morning and night you renew your days. Least my day be today as the one before, least routine set my ways. All right, so teach me, O God, a blessing, a prayer, on the mystery of a withered leaf, on ripened fruit so fair, on the freedom to see, to sense, to breathe, to know, to hope, to despair. This is about curiosity. Teach me to be curious about these things, to study them, to go at length. When is Moses seen worthy by God? When the bush is on fire, and instead of going on with his herding, he goes, wow, that's interesting. Let me go and check it out. Curiosity leads him to God. Curiosity leads us to all good things. It doesn't kill the cat. Curiosity just makes the cat a little smarter for the next time. Don't put your foot in that! Turn to page 146 and rise to the Bechul, the call to worship. Bachu et Adonai Hambarak.
Baruch Adonai Hambrach le'olam vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hambarak le'olam vaed. Praise Adonai, to whom praise is due forever. Praise be Adonai, to whom praise is due now and forever. You may be seated. There is one who sings the song of his own life, finding everything within himself. There is one who leaves the circle of herself and sings the song of her people. There is one whose voice rings with the song of humanity, hoping for the highest perfection. And there is one who rises even higher, uniting with all creatures, with all worlds, filling the universe with song. Turn to page 149. And let's read together the one at the bottom of the page. This is an hour of change. Within it we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? Arukata Adonai, Amariv, Aravim. Turn to page 152 and rise for the Shema, the watchword of our faith. Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevon Malchuto Leolam Voed. Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai is one. Blessed is God's glorious majesty forever and ever. Turn to page 154 for the Ve'ahavta. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'kol levaka u'kol nefeshka u'kol modeka ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anoki mitzvaveka hayom al levaveka v'shinatam levaneka b'dipata bam b'shepteka b'vateka uvlekteka vadarek uvshebeka uvkomeka ukshatam leodayodeka vehayu letotofot binineka uvtavtam omazuzot beteka uvishareka leman sikeru vozepken ekom mitzvotai ve'et kirushim elekem Ani Adonai Elohem Asher hotzet etkem meretz Mitzrayim leod lakem Elohim Ani Adonai Elohem. Amen. You shall love the Lord your God with all your mind, with all your strength, with all your being. Set these words I command you this day upon your heart. Teach them faithfully to your children. Speak of them in your home and on your way, when you lie down, when you rise up. Bind them as a sign upon your hand. Let them be a symbol before your eyes. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Be mindful of all my mitzvot and do them. So shall you consecrate yourselves to your God. I, the Lord, am your God, who led you out of Egypt to be your God. I, the Lord, am your God. Turn to page 158. No, that's not the one that's on the page. That's the one that I memorized. So, sometimes I do that one because I don't feel like reading anymore. And it's not my fault that they rewrote it. So, before we sing the Mikamoka, let's take a moment to meditate as we always do, but let's see the parting of the Red Sea as the closing of the end of Deuteronomy. Thank you, God. And the opening of Parsha Bereishit, of Bereishit. Genesis is actually named Bereishit. So, this is the opening of Bereishit. And so, we leave behind the cursed be you of Deuteronomy, and we go to the promise of creation in Bereishit as we sing the Mikamoka. Mikamoka Bali Madonoi Mikamoka Neda Kodesh Norata Hiloro Sefele Norata Hiloro Sefele Malkultaka Rauvaneka Okehayam Lefne Moshe Zeheli Anim Amru Adonai Imnak Leolam Bored Fanim Merkavara Noel Jacob Aglumahi Kazik Mamenu Baruch Adonai God Israel. Who is like you, O God, among the gods that are worshipped? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, working wonders? Turn to page 161, and let's read together the one at the bottom of the page. Give us a place to rest, Adonai our God. Bring us into shelter in the soft, long evening shadows of your truth. For with you are true protection and safety, and in your presence are acceptance and gentle love. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai ha'bris sukkot shalom aleinu ve'al kol mo Yisrael v'ayu Yerushalayim. Turn to page 162. And there's a good little lesson there. See how we pronounce Israel and Jerusalem? Well, that's right. Israel and Yerushalayim, not Jerusalem. Why is that? Because there is no J in Hebrew, which is why God's name cannot be Jehovah. Go forth and tell the world. Also, it can't be Yahweh. You know why? There's no W in Hebrew either. Give me a break. It says you can't pronounce it. Quit trying. Unless you're meditating, and then that's the way mystics often meditate. So there you go. Let's sing Vishamru at the top of page 162. Vishamru v'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat Latzor et ha-Shabbat ledor dom berito la. Vishamru v'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat Latzor et ha-Shabbat ledor dom berito la. Bain v'vim b'nei Yisrael, oti heleolam, oti heleolam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, latzot et ha-Shabbat ledorton barit olam. Bain v'vim b'nei Yisrael, oti heleolam, oti heleolam. Vishamru b'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat latzor et ha-Shabbat ledorton barit olam. כששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. יובים השביב שבת בנפש, שבת בנפש, שבת בנפש, ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורתם ברית עולם. Turn to page 164 and rise for the T'filah. That's pretty bad. My pages are marked and I still went past it. I should give you guys more time. You're right. 164, 166, and 168. Adonai sevatati takufi agiti toteka. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, Elohei Rahel, Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanorah, El Elyon, Gomel Hasadim Tovim v'Konei HaKol, V'ostei Astei v'Vimahot, Umikula livnei v'neivam, Man Shemo be'avah, Melchizedek Moshe Mogen, Baruch atah Adonai, Mogen Avraham Bezrat Zerah, Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Makeh hakol, Atav Roshia, Mekayeh chaim b'chesed, Mekayeh hakol b'rakabim rabim, Somek nothrim, Rorov kolim, Umatir asarim, Kayem imonoto, Lishnei afa, Mikamaka b'givurot, Umeda melech, Melech memid, Kayeh, Umasi washua, Panim anata lekat hakol, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekayeh hakol. Amen. You may be seated. Okay, so I have told you this before, but there may be people watching for the first time that don't know this. The reason you daven the way you do, or the way I do, it's the way I was taught. You talk to people that daven and pray in the morning, you're going to come up with several different techniques. But the reason why at the Baruch Hu in this prayer I always bow my knees and touch my head to my prayer book is because this is the Amidah. This is the prayer of our fathers and our mothers, but it's the prayer of our fathers, the Amidah. Abraham, every time Abraham greets a messenger from God, he prostrates himself 3 times on the ground. So he would go down on his knees and then go out and touch his forehead to the ground. So I was taught to bend my knees and then tap my head on my prayer book. That's what I was taught. And I'm sure if you talk to 3 Jews, they'll give you other things that they do during the Amidah. So take a moment to meditate on your week. Silently say the prayers of your heart. Or if you have one, read from your Siddur. If you don't, check out TV Guide for what you're going to watch later. Turn to page 180. And again, I shouldn't have to say this every time, but I do. If you need more time, just pause it. Yehu leratzon imrefi vehegyon lebi lefaneka Adonai suri Adonai suri v'go Vigoali, Vigoali, Yeule Ratson Yimrefi, Pegyon Lebi Lefaneka, Ananoi Suri, Ananoi Suri, Vigoali, Vigoali. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer. Oh, say shalom b'mermov, Huya say shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, imru, amen. Yah say shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. 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 Okay, turn to page 368 for the Aliyah. Bahu et Adonai Hambarak.
Baruch Adonai Hambarak le'olam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachal banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. This week's Parsha is Bereishit. It ends at Genesis 6:8. Many rabbis have said all we need is Torah, that the Talmud, Mishnah, even the prophecies and the writings just reteach lessons already given in Torah. But mystics believe all we need to know to understand our relationship with God, the planet, and our duties as a human are contained in the first portion in Torah, Bereishit. Volumes have been written about the first line alone, much less the whole portion. So we go from super boring, you're evil people, all these bad things are going to happen to you later, but God will forgive you and take you back, of Deuteronomy. Now we go back to the beginning. And the beginning, according to the mystics, is a blueprint for how the world and the universe, in fact, were formed and our place in it. Pretty heady stuff. We go from just being berated by Moses, really the rabbis are berating us, to interesting, every line, important stuff. So, there you go. According to the text, Adonai Elohim creates everything, light and dark, the universe, water, air, plants, animals, and humans in 6 days. On the seventh day, God creates Shabbat. God creates rest. There is, after the initial creation story, sometimes called the prologue, another longer creation story which contradicts the first in several places. For instance, in the first creation story, God created man and woman and animals on the same day, but in the second, Adam is created first. In mystic tradition, whenever something is mentioned twice, it means above and below, in heaven and on earth. Taking that into account, this would seem to imply a difference between the way things were created above and the way they were created below. A little food for thought. The Garden of Eden is created and Adam is told he can eat the fruit of every tree in the garden except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. It says Adam and Eve were naked, yet felt no shame. The serpent tempts Eve. She eats the fruit, gives it to Adam, and they are expelled from the Garden of Eden. Cain and then Abel are born. Abel finds God's favor, but Cain does not. Cain murders Abel. God expels Cain, but says to him that if anyone should kill him, God will take sevenfold vengeance on that man. Cain goes into exile in the land of Nod, finds people there. I know, right? He gets married, has kids, builds a city. There is given here the lineage of Cain. Lamech also kills, a descendant of Cain, also kills a couple of people, though it sounds like in self-defense. He asks that if anyone should kill him, that God's vengeance be 77-fold. Seems a lot of overkill there. Adam and Eve have another son, Seth. Seth had a son named Enosh, and it says that after Enosh was born, people started to invoke God by name. What is this about? Maybe the birth of religion. What follows is a long list of Adam's descendants. It's all this one begot that one, till we get to Enoch. It says, Enoch walked with God 300 years. He lived to be 365, and he was no more because God took him. Enoch's oldest son was Methuselah, from whom the saying, older than Methuselah, comes. Why? Because he lived to be 969 years old. No jokes about 69. Which makes him the longest lived person in Torah. I said no jokes, Lynn. Noah is the son of Methuselah's son, Lamech. Noah has 3 sons. The text then becomes more than a little disjointed. It tells us the divine beings saw the daughters of man and took for wives those that pleased them. God then decides man's days on earth should be 120. Moses lived to 120, and we often say at birthdays, may you live to 120. Then it says the Nephilim means fallen ones, but is often translated as giants, who were the offspring of the divine beings, and the daughters of man appeared. It says they were the heroes of old. Then we are told that mankind was wicked, and God was sorry that God made them. God planned to blot out everything God had made. The last line of the Parsha is, but Noah found favor with God. Okay, so there's a midrash, and in it 3 rabbis are having a discussion. The first one says, all we need is Torah. We don't need anything else. If we read and understand only Torah, we will be a tzaddik. A tzaddik means a righteous person. The second rabbi says, no, you are wrong. All you need to be a tzaddik is to read and understand just the book of Genesis. And the third rabbi says, you are both mistaken. All you need to read and understand to be a tzaddik is Parsha Bereishit. I think you don't even need that. If you read and understand the very first line of Parsha Bereishit and understand exactly what it's saying, you would be a tzaddik. Because what is the very first line? In the beginning, God began to create. What did God create with? God's self. If you understand that every atom ever formed from that moment on is a piece of God, if you understand that when you look in the face of your fellow person, that is a piece of God, that you are a piece of God, you would have worth within yourself, and you would see other people as being worthy. You would be humbled to point of being respectful of all things. You'd be a tzaddik. Let's talk for a minute about the order of creation. When you look at the order of creation, it's correct. It's correct. Let's talk, I like to look at Genesis, but especially Parsha Bereishit, in light of what we now know that was not known when it was written down. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They eat from the tree, see that they're naked. So what happens? They go from being unintelligent to being intelligent. Unfortunately, they also apparently learn shame because they immediately go put clothes on. Shame's not a very good thing to learn. So let's take that with what we know. And when they're expelled from Eden, what happens to them? They're told, because they ate of the tree of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, now woman will have to bear her her children in pain, and man will have to toil in the field and raise his food. It will no longer be given to him. So, let's look at science. What scientifically caused those things to happen? Fire, and more importantly, cooked meat. As humans evolved, at one point, probably a brush fire caused by a lightning strike burned some animal, and they decided to eat it. And they discovered fire, and they discovered how to keep fire and use fire. This happened over millions of years. Okay? But because we started eating cooked meat, our brains started to develop quicker than the rest of our body could keep up. And so women become the only animals on this planet that have to have help to give birth because of the size of our brains. What else happened? We became intelligent. We started to build tools. We needed to keep fire. Once you need to keep fire, what has to happen? Somebody has to tend that fire all the time. This is when people started to tribe up. People started to tribe up, and they started to keep the fire, and they would go out in hunting parties and hunt together and cook the meat, and they would eat it. They also had to start growing crops. Being nomadic wasn't as easy because it's hard to carry fire from one destination to another. So they moved less often. They went from we move every day or two to find more food to we stay in one spot as long as we can and then move on. So they started to grow crops. All of the things that it said happened because they ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So, if we assume that the tree is actually fire, then cooked meat becomes the fruit. Okay, so then it talks about Cain and the Neanderthals. Oh, it doesn't say that, does it? But Cain is all supposed to only be Adam and Eve, and Cain and Abel, who Abel's already dead at this point. Cain goes someplace, and there's other people. What do we now know scientifically after the big DNA experiment? Everyone on this planet, with the exception of Australian Aboriginals, which actually have a different ancient humanoid in their past, and pure Africans, we all have Neanderthal DNA. Some of us more than others, and it shows. So Cain goes someplace and meets other people. Scientifically, that meshes, doesn't it, with what we now know? Okay, so now you're going, and I know you are, Selina's losing her ever-loving mind. And you're correct, but I've also spent years studying both Parsha Bereishit and science, because I believe that it works best for me when I can mesh the two. Then it becomes magic for me. Okay, so it also talks about the Nephilim. The sons of God mate with the daughters of man, and they create this race of hybrids, which some people say become problematic. Now, that's all it says here. We're kind of left to fill in the dots. However, there is a book that supposedly explains all of this. It's called the Book of Enoch. Remember Enoch? Enoch's the one who God took up. Okay? The Book of Enoch is supposedly written by Enoch, who actually it's supposedly written by Methuselah, who was told it by Enoch. But what do we know about that time frame when that happened? It's prehistory. It's supposedly before Noah. So that's where the Book of Enoch, when it's supposed to be written. Now, try and find a Jewish version of the Book of Enoch. Go ahead, try. It's almost impossible. And you find out why when you start to look at it, because it's obviously got Christian roots. And so, no, it wasn't really written when they say. But I'm going to pull out the book. I wanted to read the Book of Enoch, because first off, it was originally supposedly a Jewish text. But I mostly wanted to read it because they kept talking about it on Ancient Astronauts. So, at any rate, but what I want to do is I want to show you something about ancient writings, because it is ancient, even if it's not as old as they say it is. And they began to bite one another, but that white bull, which was born amongst them, begat a wild ass, and a white bull with it, and the wild asses multiplied. But the bull which was born with him begot a black wild boar and a white sheep, and the former begat many boars, but that sheep begat 12 sheep. This is the story of Jacob and Esau, supposedly as a prophecy. But it's the story of Jacob and Esau, written, by the way after Torah. So, and then those 12 sheep had grown. They gave up one of them to the asses, and those asses again gave up that sheep to the wolves, and that sheep grew up among the wolves. This is Joseph. And the Lord brought the 11 sheep to live with it, and to pasture with it among the wolves. The wolves is Egypt. And they multiplied and became many flocks of sheep. And the wolves began to fear them, and they oppressed them until they destroyed their little ones, and they cast their young into the river with much water. Then goes on the rest of the story of the Exodus, all told in very flowery, fably, making animals out of all the main characters. So I say, am I really such a nut job when I say that perhaps the tree of life, of knowledge of good and evil, not the tree of life, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is actually fire, or that the fruit thereof is meat? This is the way they wrote. text of Torah allows it to be interpreted as we have new information about the world we live in. These people, they wrote like this because they didn't understand everything. He wrote like that. Enoch, this book of Enoch, obviously he writes like this because it wants to appear like it's prophecy by writing about animals instead of people. But as I said, the truth is the book of Enoch was written well after Torah. Ta-da! So, but Torah allows us to look at the world and look at its words, and as we know more, go, wow, these people, how would they have known this? That's the magic. That's the magic of Torah. They knew about how creation went. It's not clear or obvious until you start to peel away the layers. But when you go through Bereishit, what I read you is a Cliff Note version of Bereishit. Go in and read the whole thing. There's a lot of information there. Go in there and read it with the knowledge that you have today of how mankind evolved and how the world was made. They knew. How did they know? 556 BCE. That's when the Torah we have right now was written down from oral traditions and pieces, parts of written down stuff hundreds and hundreds of years old. That's the magic. It's the idea of how everything was created, how God created. But why? That's the question. Why? We are hardwired to create things because we are pieces of something beyond our explanation, which also finds purpose in creating. Always creating. Closing Aliyah on page 368. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher natan lanu Torah temet dekai olam neta betokenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten Torah. Amen. Turn to page 371 for the Misha Barak, our prayer for the sick. Take a moment to put the people in your list in your mind. Say their names out loud. On my list, I have David Cohen, his family, Maya Rosenzweig, Jack Goodman, Cad Gibbs, Maria Horowitz, Juanita Gibbs, Audie and Asher Mason, Caden Davidson, Aiden Davidson, Carol Bostwick, and Rachel Hatfield, and Sue Stranathan. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit. And let God also give us a complete renewal of body and spirit. Let God renew in us on this Shabbat a ray of hope which will grow. And let us say, Amen. Misha berak avotenu mikor habraka limotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha berak imotenu mikor habraka lavotenu. Bless bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Please turn to page 586 and rise for the Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabbat l'adon hakol v'ated kirula l'beisei Bereishit shelo asanu ki goy haratzot bilmo samanu ki maspakat haroma shelo sam kelkenu kaim v'gol aleinu kekol hamonam v'nachnu korim u'mishtavim u'modim Melech Malkei HaMalkim HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'ne'ema V'haya Adonai L'melech Al Kol Haaretz Bayom Hahu Yiyeh Adonai Echad U'shemo Echad. On that day the Lord shall be one, God's name shall be one. Let us say, Amen. Turn to page 593. In nature's ebb and flow, God's eternal law abides. When tears dim our vision, our grief clouds our understanding, we often lose sight of God's eternal plan. Yet we know that growth and decay, life and death all reveal a divine purpose. God, who is our support in the struggles of life, is also our hope in death. We have set God before us and shall not despair. In God's hands are the souls of all the living and the spirits of all flesh. Under God's protection we abide, and by God's love we are comforted. O life of our life, soul of our souls, cause your light to shine into our hearts and fill our spirits with abiding trust in you. I just decided I don't like that one.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, turn to page. That's who I am these days, guys. All right. Turn to page 598. We think of our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we are drawn into our hearts with our own. Take a moment to say who you are thinking of, whose yard sites are. And remember, if you want me to mention somebody's yard site, whether they're on the Art Temple list, because I'm not reading those of people I don't know, because I've been at that temple longer than anybody else, but there may be members of their family that they have on the list. If you need me to say their name, please contact me. If you can do it right there, it's easy to do. I check all the messages and everything, so do that. Tonight I think of Mark Edward Pansy. I always mention his name. When, of course, I read the whole list when we're in shul. But I always mention Mark, and I always talk about Mark whenever I'm doing services. Because Mark was the son of my very dear friends, Abraham Pansy, who, by the way, taught me a lot of what I know about Torah. And he was just a genuine, nice, big-hearted, very wise, very intelligent fellow. And his wife, Pearl. I never knew Pearl when Pearl hadn't been dealing with what happened to Mark. Because you see, when Mark was just 15 years old, someone murdered Mark, and after several days of looking for him because he was missing, they found him dead in a field where he had been. After an autopsy, they found he had drowned. No one was ever caught. No one was ever held to account. Mark's the kind of person who deserves to be remembered. Knowing the brilliance of his father and knowing the things that his brother went on to do. His brother homesteads in Alaska, for all means. He's a very together guy. who lives right off the land. He's given lots of money to a lot of causes, and he's just a really great guy. So we'll never know what Mark would have become. And Mark's story reminds us that no one has the right to take someone's child away from them. And right now, though they would never admit that's what they're doing, people that are spreading the plague, they're taking people's children away from them. Many of them, before we know what they would have become. That's never all right. So let's think about, as we say, it's on his yard site, as we say the mourner's Kaddish, I'd cry for his dad and his mom, who have been dead for years, but there you go. But as we say this, let's think about what we're really doing with the mourner's Kaddish. We're supposed to be comforting people who are in grief. And there's a lot of us right now that are in grief. So let's think about that. Let's think about putting out a wave of comfort, a net of safety for all those that are mourning, us and everyone else. As we say the mourner's Kaddish, we rise and recite the mourner's Kaddish on page 598. Yitgadav Yikadash Shemei Rabbah Yalman Divrach Lutevo Mikmor Kute Bakaye Konu Meekon Okaye Kobe Israel Bagala Zman Kariv Yamru Amen Yehe Shemei Rabbah Merak Amot Ome Omaya Yitbara Fiestabak Viepar Viraman Vitnase Vietadav Vietale Vietala Shemeda Kudasha Brehu Leo Mekobrata Vishirata Shushbekata Venekamata Damira Bioma Viamru Amen Yehe Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya Vayakaim Alenu Vio Ko Israel Viamru Amen O Se Shalom Vimra Huya Se Shalom Alenu Vio Ko Israel Viamru Amen. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to ask me and I'll try to address them on here, or I'll just answer you directly on the YouTube thing. So, looks like the numbers are ticking down. This is because we are, in part, because a lot of people are getting vaccinated, but also a lot of people have been infected, and what's happening is we're reaching at least a temporary herd immunity because so many people have been infected. If you haven't got your vaccine, it's been tested enough. Go get your vaccine. Wear your mask when you go into public. It's never okay to maybe cause somebody else's demise because of carelessness. And there are things that are important enough to take a little risk, and there are things that aren't. Time with family, time with friends, especially if you try to do it as safe as possible. We have a big day coming up. We had big plans for our big day. Lynn and I have now been together 30 years as of tomorrow. We were going to have an all-out blowout for our big 30. Of course, that cannot happen. We will be, though, having an outside party with our family. Hopefully, my sister's, Tad's over COVID. She's no longer carrying COVID. She's no longer contagious. She went back to work this week. She still has no energy, no sense of taste or smell. I'm hoping that my barbecue will be so good that she will instantaneously get her sense of taste and smell back. But we're hoping to have our family, Zeb, Meyer, all of them, and we will have it outside, and it will be fantastic because it's what we can do. And remember that. Don't bemoan what you can't do. Instead, do what you can do and do it as safely as possible. We have to have some contact with people. Having no contact with people is making some of us crazy. All right? So I hope that all of you aren't going crazy and that you're finding ways to enjoy your life in this moment by finding other things to do, other things to fill your time, people to connect with. Until next week, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Amen. May the Lord deal kindly and graciously with you. Amen. May the Lord bestow his favor upon you and grant you peace. Amen. May we be a blessing to the world. That's what we're supposed to do as Jews. And may we see that the whole world is still a blessing for us. Well, maybe not those guys. They're not a blessing for anybody. Stay safe. Be kind. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.